Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to be looking at BTUs. So BTUs are very important for when you select radiators for the rooms. So the BTU is the British Thermal Unit, which corresponds to how much heat the radiator will generate. So you can either look at BTUs or watts. But BTUs are a standard measure for when you're selecting the radiator online. You'll be looking at the product, you'll be looking at the output based on the BTU to work out, based on the square footage of your room, if that radiator will be suitable. So if you're selecting a radiator with a higher BTU than required, you're going to be wasting heat energy. So for example, it might get too warm in there. People might leave doors and windows open to cool down the area rather than simply turning down the radiator. It has happened and it's incredibly annoying. So making sure that you are putting yourself in the best position to make sure that no energy or heat is wasted is very important. But if you have a radiator with a low BTU compared to what you need for the room, the guests are going to complain. They're going to say it's freezing, we can't keep warm, give you a bad review. Very not what you want. So I'm going to go through some calculations for working out the BTU. So what you're going to be looking at, as you saw in the last video, is the square foot of the area. So for the height, the width, and the length of the room, to work out the square footage, you're also going to be thinking about if there's windows, if there's insulation, if there's patio doors, if it's north facing, for example, because you'll lose heat. Flat roofs, all these things will impact how effective your room is at keeping in heat or releasing heat, which is very important to keep your guests happy. So the BTU is the amount of heat required to raise 1 pound of water by 1 degree Fahrenheit. So radiators, water, Fahrenheit, heat, good stuff. So going through some calculations, I'm going to show you when I go buy radiators, what radiator I would be buying for the rooms that we looked at before. So I'll just be inputting the measurements, as I said before, so the length, the height, the width, all into the certain settings. You can also select what kind of room it is. So if you have a bedroom or a bathroom or a kitchen, you're going to probably have slightly different radiators, like a radiator with a towel rack, for example. In the bathroom, multi-purpose, excellent. So these things are all included. Insulation also can be selected on the program as well to give you the correct BTUs. So lots of sites will be available to help you work out BTU. So the one I'm going to use is Just Radiators because that's where I'm buying my radiators from at the moment. So follow along and I'll just show you quickly how I work out the calculations here.
Okay, great. So here we are at Just Radiators. So you want to scroll down to the bottom and you'll find the BTUs to calculate. So looking at the room measurements from before. So the length of the first room was 3.6 and then the next one for the width was 2.8 and the height was 2.7. So in this room, it's going to be a bedroom. It's not going to have any north-facing walls. It's also got no patio doors. So can remove both of those things. So the BTU that's been calculated is 3,460. So then we're going to go look for the radiators that fit the right category. So going on to filters allows you to select what you want exactly. So I'm going through a grey phase at the moment with my radiators. So clicking on grey filters them through. So the width for the space that I had, so I can't have a radiator more than 80 by 90. So selecting through to get a better size, something that's going to fit in the gap nicely. Here we go. And then going down, very important obviously to make sure that we get something with the right BTU. So between 3,000 and 4,000 will be great. So I quite like the look at the first one there. As I say, grey theme, not too bad for price there. Looks quite nice. Then you're going to choose an option. As I said, grey's great. And then making sure the single or the double radiator is going to match the BTU required. So if we click on a few, it will show you different prices. And then you can see here the heat output is not quite right. So I need something, maybe a double. It's a bit better, but still not quite there. Let's try again, something a bit bigger, just to make sure we're getting the right BTU. That one there will do it. So that's great. So that could be a good option for a potential radiator, and it shows you a few more stats about it. 5-year warranty, which is great. Again, lets you check the BTU and the watts before purchasing. There we go. So then if we go and have a look at another room, this time let's have a look at the kitchen. So going down again, calculating the BTU, back onto the calculator, back into meters, because that's what I measured it in. So the length here is 4.45, the width is 3 meters, and then the height is 2.8. So no north-facing walls. Patio doors, yes, because it has a door out into the courtyard. It's a kitchen, and it's got double glazing. So it's a higher BTU this time, 4,277. So then going back out again, back into selecting a certain type of radiator. So for the kitchen, I want a taller radiator. So rather than one that goes in more of a panel shape, I want like a height-wise, so thinner but taller. So for this one, again, want to get finished for grey, if I can find it. Then going down again, making sure it's a nice tall radiator, about 2 meters would be great. I measured the space on the wall as we saw in the last video to make sure that would fit in there nicely. And then going down for the BTUs, that's the right range. And then it gives you a few options of potential radiators. Again, you want a wall-mounted, taller radiator. Lets you look at a few styles all at once. There's not actually that many on this site for the ones that I'm after. But this one here should be okay. Again, looking at the grey theme as well, I think it looks quite smart. So there's an example of a said radiator. And then go down again so I can select it in the grey. Pick the height that I'm after, so it gives you a few tall options. A few different sections, so that more on the sections, the higher the BTUs. It's a more powerful radiator. So that's about right, 4,436. So that one would sort nicely into the kitchen. So that just gives you a quick run through of how you select your radiators based on the measurements you've got.
Okay, great. So now we've looked at those calculations. The next step would be picking a suitable radiator. So even though we've calculated the BTUs of a certain room, it's important to consider that some radiators will need different BTUs depending on the type. So you've got something like a panel radiator, so your average rectangular radiator that you'll see quite commonly in lots of rooms. Your column radiator, which is like a taller radiator that we mounted on the wall. It's only around 2 meters long, or something like a towel radiator, so your bathroom, just pop the towels on there to dry them off. These all have slightly different BTU requirements, so when you're selecting the radiators on websites or in person, for example, make sure you tell the people where the radiators are going to go, because this will be quite important. So it's important to check the specifics of each model. So another thing to consider is energy efficiency. So some radiators, despite having a higher BTU, will be more energy efficient and therefore cheaper to run than ones with lower BTUs. So for example, if you had a radiator with a higher BTU in a smaller room, the room would heat up faster and then the radiator could just be turned off, rather than having a smaller one to heat the room and be on constantly. So energy efficient radiators are great. You can also have smart thermostats, which will just turn off when the room's reached a certain temperature, which is great. And you can just monitor that easily from your phone, for example. Like a Nest is quite good for controlling the central heating in the building, just to keep the temperature managed so you know how much energy or heat is being used. So BTU is super important for selecting the right radiators. You want to make sure you're looking at insulation, room size, radiator type, those kind of things, for example, just to make sure that you don't get a radiator that's not suitable for the room, and then you end up having cold guests or hot guests that leave all the windows open and cost you money. Very important. Make sure you get that right. Massive cost in winter, especially. Like that's not good. Even sometimes people don't know how to use the heating system properly, and they'll leave the radiators on during summer, which is like really not okay. So follow along, give us a like, subscribe, just for more updates on helpful tips to do with Airbnbs and saving costs, for example, what I've spoken about in this video. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one.